Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Slooth Crime Stories. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a case we investigated together. One day, a lady who owns a hair salon had a bad thing happen while she was working at night. Even though someone saw the person who did it, we didn't have many clues, so the case stayed unsolved. 10 years later, a new clue came up, and we finally figured out what happened. This is the Dana Satterfield case. The main person in our story is Dana Satterfield. SE's 27 years old and owns a hair salon. Dana is good-looking and friendly, so lots of people come to her salon. She lives in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in a place named after a group from the American Revolutionary War. But her salon is on a quiet road in Spartanburg. Dana is married and has 2 kids. Lately, she's been having problems with her husband, and they've been living apart. Then, something bad happened to Dana. So, what happened that day? How did Dana get into trouble? Let's go back to July 31, 1995. On July 31st, 1995, which was a Monday, a 27-year-old woman named Dana was working in her hair salon, just like any other day. She was the only hairstylist there, so she often worked until very late at night. Around 6:30 in the evening, Dana bought a bottle of cleaning solution from a woman named Sherry, who was selling things. Then she went back to her salon to keep working. At about 8:11 in the evening, Sherry, who was still selling things, walked past Dana's salon. At that time, Dana was cleaning her shop. They said hello to each other, and Sherry went on to sell her products nearby. After about 15 minutes, at 8:30, Sherry decided it was time to go home. She waited under a streetlight near Dana's salon for her ride. Right then, she noticed the lights in Dana's salon suddenly went out, and there was a noise. Next, she saw a man open the salon's door and jump out of the window. After getting up from the ground, the man saw Sherry nearby. When he saw her, he quickly covered his head with a gray t-shirt and ran away towards the side of the building. Late at night, Sherry got scared by something she saw. She quickly ran the other way, planning to go to a nearby store to call for help. Let's look at what happened. After the man jumped out of the hair salon window, he ran in one direction and Sherry ran in a different one. Soon, they met again at a store entrance. They looked at each other for a moment. Sherry saw the man's face well, and he looked scared. He turned and ran far away, slowly disappearing from Sherry's sight. Sherry ran to the road, waving her hands, trying to get cars to stop. It was already around 8 or 9 in the evening, and there weren't many cars. Some drivers thought Sherry was hitchhiking and didn't pay much attention. After no one stopped, Sherry ran to the closest store and called the police. When the police got the call, they quickly went to Dana's hair salon. In the bathroom of the salon, they found Dana. She was sitting on the floor, leaning against a water heater, looking messy. A rope was around her neck, tied to the water heater, and she didn't seem alive. Dana had many bruises on her body, and there was a lot of blood in the hair salon, suggesting there was a big fight. Sadly, Dana lost her life. The only damaged part of the salon was the bathroom. Dana's bag was on a table, and her keys were nearby. The money in the salon was not taken, and nothing else was missing. So, the police didn't think it was a robbery. After that, experts in forensics and fitness came to the scene. They used a special light to check for reactions from semen. They found a reaction at the scene, but to know more, they needed to do more tests in the lab, hoping to find the DNA of the person responsible. Dana's husband, Mike, was told by the neighbors and went to the salon. Mike told the police that he and Dana had 2 kids but were having problems in their marriage and had been living apart for some time. However, they hadn't gotten divorced. Mike was very sad when he heard about his wife's murder. When Dana was found, she was sitting on the floor, leaning against a water heater, with a rope tied around her neck. The other end of the rope was attached to the water heater. The police discovered Mike's fingerprints on the water heater. Dana, a hard-working and customer-oriented business owner, was tragically killed in her salon. Recently, her relationship with her husband Mike had become strained. This led the police to quickly consider Mike as a suspect. They then interviewed Sherry, the witness from that day, to gather more information. Did Sherry see the person who did the bad thing clearly that evening? Sherry said she saw the person well. He was a young white man with brown or golden brown hair that looked like it had been permed or dyed. He was about 1.73 meters tall and weighed around 65 kilograms. An artist drew a picture of the person based on Sherry's description, and it didn't look like Dana's husband, Mike, at all. But the way the person jumped out of the salon window didn't match what Mike could do. Look at a picture of the salon window. It's small, but a regular adult could jump out. Now, look at a picture of Mike. It's almost impossible for someone with his body size to jump out of the window without getting stuck. This is different from what the witness saw. So, why were Mike's fingerprints on the water heater? Mike said he works as a plumber and installed the water heater in the salon. He had someone else help him, and that person can confirm it. The police looked into whether Mike paid someone to do the murder, but they didn't find any clues or proof. So, they stopped suspecting Mike. Then, they got new information. At about 8:40 on the night of the incident, a person driving by the hair salon saw a strange man near a blue Ford SUV with special plates. The man was making negative gestures and acting threateningly. Let's look at the timeline. At 8:11 p.m., Dana said hello to Sherry. At 8:30 p.m., Sherry saw a man jumping out of the hair salon window. Around 8:40 p.m., someone saw a man in a Ford SUV, and it seemed likely that he was the one who killed Dana. Finding this Ford SUV could help find the murderer, so the police shared a drawing of the suspect and a picture of the blue Ford SUV. Someone who works near the salon said they saw a big blue and white Ford SUV parked between two large trucks on that night when they were going home from work. The guy who saw the car really knows a lot about cars. He remembered it well. The police checked lots of cars with similar features and found 30 that matched. All of them had the same license plate. They traced the plate to a woman named Ann Vick in Robertstown. Now, they're trying to figure out if Mrs. Ann Vick is connected to the case. At first, Mrs. Vick helped the police. She said her son took the car out on the night of the incident, but she insisted he had nothing to do with it. She thought maybe the police got confused because their car looked like the one they were looking for. Mrs. Vick's son's trips in that car are always tracked or reported. Later, Mrs. Vick put a note on the car, basically saying it had already been checked and she asked not to report it anymore. She even went to the local newspaper, saying the police were bothering her and she didn't want to help anymore. Since Mrs. Vick wasn't cooperating, the police took the person who saw the car that night to her area to check things out. From a distance, the police tried to get the person who saw the car to confirm if it was the right one. But the witness said that, although the car looked a bit like the one from that night, she didn't think it was the same blue Ford SUV. With the witness saying it wasn't the right car, the police couldn't do anything, and this lead was a dead end. Then, the lab finished testing the evidence. Based on what they found at the scene, it seemed likely that Dana had been sexually assaulted. Sadly, the lab couldn't find the DNA of the person who did it. One forensic expert didn't give up. She remembered using UV light at the scene and seeing a reaction from semen. But why couldn't they find it? Frustrated, she went back to the scene and re-examined everything. Finally, she found DNA from semen on a comb. However, since the police hadn't found any other suspects, even if they found someone now, they couldn't match the DNA. The case came to a stop, and it couldn't be solved. With no new evidence or leads, it stayed an unsolved case. In 2005, it had been 10 years since the incident with Dana, and it was still unresolved. Even after 10 years, the police didn't completely give up on solving Dana's case. Every so often, they'd get new leads. In that year, a new police chief started working in Spartanburg. As soon as he took charge, he ordered a fresh look at the old, unsolved case. He thought that maybe the technology back then wasn't good enough to solve it. He assigned Detective Smith to reinvestigate, but finding answers remained difficult. Detective Smith, when given the task, decided to get help from an expert, a retired FBI profiler who was also a skilled forensic sketch artist. A forensic sketch artist is someone trained to study how crimes happen, look at crime scenes, and understand the characteristics of criminals. They draw conclusions about the criminal's mindset based on how they commit the crime, the layout of the crime scene, and any distinctive features of the criminal. This helps in creating a more detailed profile of the suspect. A crucial trait of a forensic sketch artist is the ability to predict what a suspect might do next. This helps the police focus on specific areas and act quickly to prevent more crimes. The retired detective, armed with the original photos and information, studied the case details. After that, the detective suggested to the police that the culprit might be a young white man, likely familiar with the area and well acquainted with Dana's daily routine. This person could have been a customer at the salon and had hidden feelings for Dana. Their education might not be very high, and after the crime, they might choose to leave the local area or join the military. Using these insights, Detective Smith started looking into people who matched these characteristics. Around this time, Dana's mother unexpectedly called the police, saying that someone named David Pace might have information about her daughter's case. David was a 27-year-old working at an auto repair shop. A decade had gone by since the incident. Dana's oldest daughter, Ashley, who was now 18, went to the auto repair shop where David worked to get her car fixed. The unexpected meeting with David stirred up memories from 10 years ago. Sensing that he might hold some clues about the case, he reached out to Dana's parents. The police swiftly located David, and though he hinted at knowing some leads, he was reluctant to share them. However, he agreed to spill the details if the police promised to keep his identity secret. David mentioned he had been threatened by a man and wanted to avoid further involvement. The police assured him of confidentiality and listened to his story. David disclosed that he suspected his friend, Jonathan Vick, might be connected to the crime. Remember the Vick family, especially Mrs. Vick, who refused to cooperate and accused the police of harassment? Jonathan was Mrs. Vick's 17-year-old son at the time of the incident a decade ago. As a minor, his parents hadn't allowed him to be questioned by the police. Later, when the witness dismissed the vehicle, the police didn't pursue further at their home. David went on to explain that 10 years ago, he and Jonathan had a close relationship and often went out together in a car. On the day of the incident, David had just finished work at a bowling alley and was heading home. When he got there, Jonathan, Mrs. Vick's son, was at home. They sat down and chatted for a bit. During their conversation, Jonathan brought up Dana, describing her as the owner of a hair salon, older than him, and having problems in her marriage. Despite the age gap, Jonathan mentioned that he liked her. David thought Jonathan was just joking and teased him about it. Unexpectedly, Jonathan got really angry. David mentioned that on that day, after Jonathan dropped him off at home, Jonathan said he was going to get a haircut from Dana, even though it was late. Jonathan believed the salon would still be open. A few days after the incident, David ran into Jonathan at a local pool hall. Jonathan told him, "I'm planning to join the military, and I probably won't be back for a long time, but there's something I want to tell you. If you tell anyone, I'll kill you." David was left confused by Jonathan's mysterious words, with Jonathan warning him that he would find out or know later. They never spoke again after that encounter. Based on David's account, the police started to think that Jonathan matched the description of the young white man the retired FBI investigator had deduced. Someone familiar with Dana's routine, interested in her, possibly leaving the area after the incident, and resembling the sketch provided by witness Sherry. The police began investigating Jonathan as the potential perpetrator, but initially, they couldn't find where he was. During this search, they discovered a woman connected to Jonathan who had a child fathered by him. She was willing to help the police and shared that Jonathan had a violent side, as he had assaulted her, pushing her into a bathtub. Jonathan had also driven her past Dana's hair salon. On that day, he mentioned that there was a case there and the police were trying to blame him, but they lacked evidence. "If you dare to run away, I'll make you disappear like him." As the investigation unfolded, the police learned that Jonathan had an ex-fiancée named Heather Sellers, who went missing on the afternoon of September 24, 2002. On that day, Jonathan picked up Heather from her aunt's house, and they went to a bar before she vanished. Jonathan was the primary suspect, but due to a lack of evidence, he was not prosecuted. 2 months later, Detective Smith finally tracked down Jonathan and gave him a call. The detective mentioned he was reviewing old files and wanted to know more about the details of the Dana case. He suggested meeting Jonathan on Saturday, and Jonathan agreed. However, when Saturday came around, Jonathan stood up Detective Smith, failing to show up. Combining all the existing evidence, Detective Smith strongly suspected Jonathan was the likely perpetrator, leading him to request his superiors for the forced collection of Jonathan's DNA. The court approved the request, and 2 weeks later, the police obtained Jonathan's DNA sample by force. The lab compared Jonathan's DNA with the one found on the comb 10 years ago, confirming a complete match. The exhaustive search for the perpetrator pointed directly to Jonathan. In October 2005, the police arrested him, charging him with the murder of Dana. Jonathan, however, insisted he didn't know anyone named Dana and had no connection to the case. In November 2006, the case went to trial once more. Initially maintaining his innocence, Jonathan eventually succumbed in the face of overwhelming evidence. He was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. Regarding Jonathan's disappeared ex-fiancée, Heather Sellers, in 2006, the police discovered blood and blonde hair in an abandoned vehicle registered to the Sellers family. Speculation arose that the blood and hair belonged to Heather, but confirmation was pending. Although Jonathan remained a suspect in Heather's disappearance, he was never prosecuted. In 2010, while in military camp, Larson faced aggravated charges for assaulting another inmate. Jonathan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and this sentence was set to last until 2035. After 10 years, the case reached a resolution, and justice was served. However, the fate of Jonathan's ex-fiancée, Heather Sellers, remains unknown. Whether she is still alive, and if her disappearance is linked to Jonathan or not, remains a mystery. There's a possibility that Jonathan orchestrated the entire situation.
Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications.